Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for this info session about advanced teaching roles. We are going to get started, if I can get my slides to work here. All right, so I'm Leah Sutton. I am Vice President Policy and Engagement at Best NC, and part of our work is to support the Advanced Teaching Roles Initiative across North Carolina and to hopefully share valuable information to you, the districts who might be interested in pursuing this innovation in your schools. We are big supporters and believers of this work, and so we hope to be of support to you. And we wanted to, along with DPI, wanted to sort of provide information about the upcoming RFP opportunity to the districts and have just a little bit of informal Q&A time as well, so that if you have any burning questions as you're thinking about preparing a proposal, you have time to ask those questions in advance of the RFP opening next month. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Robert Sox at DPI. He is, oh, sorry, let me back up for just a second. So we're going to have a presentation today from Dr. Sox, who manages this RFP opportunity at the department. And he's going to share a little bit about the rubric and what previous applications have done and how to sort of make a strong proposal from the department's side. And then we're going to have Q&A. So Dr. Sox will stick around for the Q&A. And then we also have Dr. Cheryl Wilson, who's Associate Superintendent in Wilson County Schools. They are beginning their implementation of advanced teaching roles this fall. They've just exited their planning year. And so she'll be on to help with Q&A to answer any questions sort of from that implementation perspective. And then we also have Sylvia Anthony-McGeachy from Edgecombe County Schools. She's the Neela Wallace Grant Coordinator there. She's been on the ground in the district for many years. They've been implementing advanced teaching roles since 2016. And so she has some perspective, can share some lessons learned from a district that's been doing this for a bit of time. So we'll have the Q&A with those two following the presentation. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sox, who's going to present for a few minutes about this RFP opportunity. And Robert, if you just want to let me know when you want to advance the slides, I'll go ahead and click forward for you.
Sure, we'll do. When this is all finished, Leah, will the slides be accessible to everybody?
Yes, thank you for asking.
Okay.
We are recording the session, so we will have both the recording and the slides available following the event. And we'll send those out to folks by email.
Very good, very good. So my role here at the department is I'm the Director of Educator Standards and Evaluation, and the support of the RFP for advanced teaching roles is part of my responsibilities. What I want to call your attention to on this slide is just my email address. Please feel free, if you have questions after today related to this or even other things, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm try to be as supportive and helpful to folks as possible in my work. So it's robert.sox@dpi.nc.gov. My office telephone number is there as well. I keep my office telephone forwarded to my cell phone. So if you call that number, it will get to me one way or the other. So if you will click to that next slide for me, Leah, that'd be great. So at the process for advanced teaching roles began its life as a pilot. And so the idea was our legislators wanted to see if we could infuse some opportunity for teachers to have unique roles leading in their districts. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what the dimensions of those roles are can be. But in September, or a year ago, they changed the legislation to shift from a pilot to a program. And so DPI was directed that by September 15th of 2020, that we would release an RFP for the first program cohort of advanced teaching roles. And the difference in a pilot and the program is the pilots lasted for 3 years and programs are funded for 3, but the program status lasts for 5. So someone is identified as an advanced teaching roles program would be able to operate that program in a 5-year cycle. The first 3 years are funded with funds from the legislature. And at the end of that 5-year period, we will have a process by which a district can indicate if they wish to continue or discontinue their advanced teaching roles program. Now, within that legislation, there is opportunity for various size districts. And so that's the bullet points that you see on this slide. We can, based on the quality of applications, fund up to 5 units with an ADM of 4,000 or fewer, so up to 5 that are relatively small. Up to 5 with an average daily membership between 4,001 and 20,000, so up to 5 that are kind of medium, and then up to 5 that are large or extremely large districts. So our legislature wants to make sure this is a pretty even playing field in terms of size of districts, so that a large district isn't necessarily favored in the outcome. So the direction to DPI is to try to spread the wealth among different sizes of school districts, assuming that the quality of their proposal is meets the expectations of the rubric. So if you'll click to the next slide, Leah, that'd be great. So the purpose of the program is to allow highly effective classroom teachers to do a couple of things possibly. So either to teach a larger number of students by assuming accountability for a greater number of students than those who are simply in their homeroom. They also might become a lead classroom teacher who is accountable specifically for the students in their classroom and the other teachers they are leading directly. Advanced teaching roles might also have roles for teachers who are leading a larger effort in the district to implement specific school improvement and school-wide performance goals or strategies. And another purpose is to try to help those districts think about how they might provide additional supplementary salaries to these teachers to account for the leadership that they are providing in their districts. And there are some specific parameters around how those supports for those teachers are structured, and those are outlined in Senate bill and session law that are here referenced on this slide. Another purpose is to help the local school administrative units find innovative models that really focus on classroom teacher growth. The goal of an advanced teaching roles teacher is to help more kids learn, but a key dimension of that is helping other teachers in the building to increase and improve their effectiveness. And then to use your local plans to establish organizational changes and structures so that you can build out sustainable processes for supporting these advanced teaching roles, both structurally as well as fiscally. Because the goal is to develop models that after the grant period are self-sustaining and structured in ways that other districts could say, wow, how did you do that? And they could perhaps implement an advanced teaching roles kind of model without necessarily having an infusion of cash, because the idea is high quality models that we discover through this process could then be leveraged by other districts that at some point in the future, lots of districts would have advanced teaching kinds of roles to provide leadership to improve and support instruction in their district. So Leah, next slide, please. So if you choose to develop a proposal, some key dates that are going to be really important for you to think about is we will release the RFP on September the 15th. That date is outlined in general statute. Now, we're going to talk a little bit today about the actual rubric. I'm going to share with you some highlights from the rubric, and the rubric is contained within the RFP itself. So on September 15th, we'll have that out. I expect it'll go out in a couple of ways. I will ask my direct supervisor, Dr. Tom Tomberlin, to push it out to his Human Resources Director listservs. I'll do what I can to get it out to superintendents. So if you are the person responsible for the grant, I encourage you to network with both your superintendent and your HR director to say, hey, I hear that this is going out via some communication chains to you. If you hear about it, let me know. We'll also leverage Best NC to help us get the word out as well. So if you're on a mailing list that Leah manages, it may come directly to your inbox as a part of that as well. We don't want to hide it. We want to get the word out as quickly as we can. So that RFP, I hope if you're thinking about developing a program that you're already thinking about it, because when the RFP is released on the 15th, proposals are due a month later on October the 15th. So on October the 15th, we will be at the close of business that day. We will say everything that's received up to this point is in the hopper for consideration. And between October 15th and December 15th, we will engage a group of stakeholders from various roles to read and assess the quality of the applications. They will be rated, and then based on those ratings, we will make a proposal to the State Board of Education as to how how to allocate the funding across those districts that scored at a threshold that's determined that funding is appropriate to support their programs. If you click the next slide. Now, it is possible that in the budget that is not yet released, that there could be some monies associated with advanced teaching roles. Our legislators really appreciate this work, and they really think it's an important way to support education in North Carolina. But we don't know yet whether they'll put extra money towards advanced teaching roles. What we do know is there are two standing buckets, and those two standing buckets, there's an operational bucket of advanced teaching roles funding that adds up to $1 million. There's another operational budget that adds up to $500,000. And what you see on the screen is a little complicated, but I'll share it with you just a little bit. The bars that you see under the dates that say July, those are funding cycles. They're 3-year funding cycles. And so what you see is at the beginning of July 2017, the first pilot cohort began using their money. And their money is all used up by the time you get to the end of that 3rd-year cycle, so that $1 million funding is then available again to fund pilot cohort 3. So pilot cohort 3 was the last pilot before we shifted to a program. So they're using the $1 million bucket. And the reason I want you to see this is because what's rolling around available for funding for this cycle is the $500,000 bucket. So we will have to determine, based on quality of applications, how to fund and use that $500,000 spread across those proposals. For most cases in the past with advanced teaching roles proposals, most proposals have been funded partially. So depending on how many awards we want to offer, that $500,000 will have to be spread to fit. So we'll make recommendations to the board, and we'll let them tell us how they'd like to allocate those funds. In most cases in the past, the board's priority has been to provide as much funding to as many of the qualified programs as possible. So I say that to you so that as you develop your programs, think about what your budget is and what you have. And when you put your whole budget together, you might want to organize it in priority so that your absolute have-tos are at the top and your nice to haves are at the bottom. So if we have a scenario where there's enough money to fully fund all of the programs that are selected, you'll be good because everything will be able to be covered by your grant funds. But if for some reason the board says, wow, we have so many applicants that are of high quality, we need to really spread that $500,000 across as many as possible, you'll be well positioned to take your budgeted items and say, well, if we can't get all of our money, we can drop these lower priority items from the budget. So just think about what your priorities are, and are there things you would want to do, but you could live without if what is offered to you for funding is less than what you actually request in your budget overall. And so I just want you to be aware of how this works. The reality of the process is that every 3 years, we'll have an RFP for which there are no funds currently available unless more get put in. So the folks that will put together an RFP proposal for cohort 4, which is 2 years from now, will actually be in a year where there are currently no grant funds available. So I just want you to be aware of the size of the pool of money that is available, and depending on how many people, how many of the applications score well. So there's a question that says, are these funds for the whole grant overall? No, so these are annual. So this round, if whoever is selected this round, we will spread this $500,000 across those, and it's $500,000 for the first year, then $500,000 for the second year, and $500,000 for the third year. So that's a 3-year cycle that the money is available to them. So that's a good clarifying question. Thank you for asking that. So not to get too much in the weeds, I just want you to be aware of what the amount is that's available that we'll have to spread across all of those who are selected. So if we could click to the next slide, Leah, that would be great. So within the RFP, near the end, there is an actual rubric, and it's in Appendix B at the end, and it looks like the page that I've done a quick screenshot here on the screen. I want to talk to you a little bit about the structure of the rubric because it's going to inform the remaining slides that I'm going to go through today. So the folks who read these, and we have folks that represent universities, some districts, as well as some staff at the agency who are not related to my division. So nobody who is directly involved with this process is doing the reading. I actually don't read or score applications. So we'll get a team together that will score these, and they'll be using this rubric. It's a structured rubric where they will, on each of the dimensions of the plan, they'll be providing a score that will identify your proposal in that area as minimal, weak, average, strong, or excellent. And you can see just by the way that this screenshot is on the screen, minimal is a little bit. And as you move to the right, there becomes more complex and there's more of an expectation of what the pieces, the parts, and the dimensions are to your response in that. So when Leah asked if I could offer you some advice for how to design a proposal that would fare well through the process, I think the best way for us to approach that is to talk about what the highest score level is for each of the dimensions. So that's what we're going to go through now. Each of the next few slides, I will be sharing with you specifically what that highest level is. So as you think about designing your proposals, if you want your proposals to be fantastic, design them so that when you read it, you can put your finger on specific things that match these bullets, because if you can find them, the readers will be able to find them and your plan will score exceptionally well. So in terms of plan design, an excellent plan design is a plan design that establishes a clear process for selecting, creating, and developing these advanced teaching roles. And within that, it needs to articulate the preliminary work for the process and the implementation. So what systems do you need to put in place to get ready to be ready to have advanced teaching roles? These are the kinds of things that you'll do right after you learn that you've won the award. And often these are structural organizational things that probably won't necessarily cost a lot of money, but you've got to think about who are the people that are going to lead this? What are our communication systems going to look like in the district? You need to identify specific timelines for completion as you get your infrastructure together, as you make your selection, as you let your teachers know what the process looks like so that those schools that are participating understand what they can expect. Identify what those things look like within your plan itself. And it's going to be really important that it contains a coherent theory of action supported by research. And basically what that means is to say, we believe if our teachers who are in advanced teaching roles provide direct coaching support to other teachers, it is likely that the performance of those teachers will increase. And we know this because there's research on teachers, highly effective teachers coaching others that says that typically those students for those teachers are going to do well. So really providing your theory of action and thinking about what does the research say and does it support the design and the structure that you've built out in your system, in your district. Next slide. So after plan design, the next thing that our readers are going to be looking for is how are you thinking about who qualifies for these advanced teaching roles positions? Remember, the goal of our legislature is that highly effective teachers are the people who are stepping into these roles to support the other teachers in reflecting on and improving their practice. So it's important that you identify your qualifications. What are the characteristics of these people? And the highest scoring characteristics are plans that identify at least 5 qualifications. And in parentheses, you see here, it says one of which is approved. Within the legislation, it speaks to particular expectations of effectiveness that our legislators are looking for. So you would want at least one of your 5 to be on that list. And this is identifying who's eligible to serve in these advanced teaching roles positions. So most districts who do this put together a pool, teachers apply to the pool, and then they select from that pool. You'll want to describe that process in your plan. What does that look like? You will score well if your plan identifies a weighting system for these criteria. So is the effectiveness of the students they've taught weighted higher or lower than the teacher's number of years of experience, or those kinds of things? So what's your weighting criteria? Are there characteristics of your rubric for determining who your candidates are that are more important than others? Again, it's important that you have a theory of action. Why are you doing this? We're doing this because we believe this process is going to improve the work of the teachers that this advanced teaching roles educator is supporting. And it's also important as you think about how you're going to figure out who these people are, that you're using both quantitative and qualitative information to identify the best candidates for consideration for your advanced teaching roles. Next slide, Leah. So the third item in the rubric relates to job responsibilities, and an excellent response for job responsibilities is going to articulate specific responsibilities for the advanced teaching roles, folks, at least 5. And one of those needs to be off of the list of approved job responsibilities. And these are the things that the folks who are selected and serving in these roles are going to be doing. It's the shape of the work they will be doing. Again, it's important that this dimension use a weighting system as you think about what those responsibilities are. It's most important for the teacher leaders to do these things on the list. It's less important as we move to the bottom of the list. Your theory of action needs to suggest or identify why these responsibilities are important for these leaders to be providing in your district. And again, as you think about how you would want to measure these job responsibilities, are your advanced teaching roles teachers doing the work you expect them to do? Are you using qualitative and quantitative measures to figure out whether you're getting the best leadership from these advanced teaching roles teachers? And the next one, Leah, is your communication strategy. It's important to our legislators that districts that are having advanced teaching roles positions are well aware that these things are taking place within their district. So it's going to be important for you to think about, how do you let possible candidates for these advanced teaching roles positions know that this opportunity is there? How are you going to let teachers who might be led by these advanced teaching roles teachers that this model is coming to your district and will be in place? And also, how are you going to let parents know that you have this structure and strategy for adults to support one another in improving the education that their children are receiving in your school? So as you think about developing your plan, you'll want to provide evidence that your plan was crafted with a variety of stakeholders. You might even want to ask folks, if you were led by an advanced teaching roles teacher, what kind of leadership would you expect? You might even think about asking parents, if you knew that teachers in this building were working together to improve the education your child is receiving, what are the kinds of things you would hope those teachers would be doing to work together, reflect on, and improve their practice? It's important as you think about that, if you have a design committee that helps you to articulate what this communication strategy is, that you identify who those folks are. Who were the people in your district that helped you to think about the shape and structure of these advanced teaching roles positions? You need to talk about and identify your communication strategy. What are the things you're going to do to let the stakeholders and the members of your school community know that this is happening? You need to identify specific dates and locations for your communications. If you plan to put out a newsletter as soon as you discover that you've won the award, to let folks know what the plan is so they can be involved with and offer input to the planning along the way. It's important to think about what the kinds of questions your stakeholders might ask as you begin to put this together, and include how you'll communicate and answer those frequently asked questions. And again, finally, to include how you will provide ongoing communication strategies throughout the program as you're doing that work in your district. So are you going to have newsletters? Are you going to have a website? How will people be aware of how this work is transpiring after year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, throughout the whole full dimension of the program? So the next one is about the budget. So as you think about the budget and how you think about how you would spend the funds if they were granted to you, it's really important that you identify how your salary supplements will be distributed at all levels of your new compensation model. So you know from earlier, there are a couple of models. You might have a teacher that's teaching more kids. You might have a teacher that's leading other teachers and taking responsibilities for those kids, or you might have a teacher that's part of a large school improvement initiative. Well, let's imagine that your program had all 3 of those kinds. It's possible that the salary differential for each of those kinds of leadership might be a little different in your program. And if that's the case, you need to identify how it is that those different levels of supplements and how you're supporting those salaries, how does that break out across the different shapes and sizes of roles? If you have all one shape or size of advanced teaching role in your district, every advanced teaching roles teacher is doing the same kind of thing, you won't have as many different pieces of information for this first bullet. It's important for you to define how the funds that are provided to you and any local funds that you're putting into the process are going to be used to support the professional learning that's needed for these advanced teaching roles, and how you're going to provide support to the classroom teachers that are availing themselves and being led by these advanced teaching roles teachers. It's going to be really important that you specify the number of schools and number of personnel that are going to be included in your pilot. You may have advanced teaching roles happening in your district, and you may be a large district with 25 schools, but only 5 schools are a part of your advanced teaching roles program. If this is the case, your plan needs to identify that so it's clear to the readers that this is a grouping of schools within a larger district, and not that advanced teaching roles is stretching across every school in the district. And then finally, to clearly define how your funds are going to be used by your central office personnel to provide support for the pilot. So are there going to be needs where you're going to need to supplement or support your structures centrally that help these advanced teaching roles teachers and the processes to move forward in your district? And then the next item, Leah, is sustainability. So our legislators really wanted to make sure that they weren't pumping money into a program that when the money went away, that all of these programs stopped. So I'm going to pause just a moment and answer a question. I see there's a question in the chat bar. It says, can the scope change across the program, adding schools each year? The scope can absolutely change. You'll want to articulate that in your initial plan. It may be that you find that you want to roll up and ramp up your number of schools as you move forward. And as we think about the sustainability, which I'm going to talk about now, that could be a really valuable feature if you are ramping it up, increasing the number of schools, and you find a way to make that sustainable so that you can support it locally after your grant funds are over. That could make for a really powerful proposal that might actually look quite different than many of the other proposals. So sustainability, an excellent sustainability plan really offers specific details of how your district is going to continue or expand the program at the conclusion of your grant funding. At the absolute minimum, our legislators are hopeful that if you get funded for 3 years to put all of the infrastructure in place for an advanced teaching roles process and program to exist in your district, that when the money is used up, that the program continues. The analogy I use with folks is you're being given money to build a clock. So your advanced teaching roles program is kind of like building a clock. So your 3 years is building the clock, so that after those 3 years, the money you spent building on the clock, people can use that clock to tell time for a long time to come, because the funding was used to build the infrastructure and build the model so that people can use its outcome, the time the clock provides, in perpetuity, hopefully. It's important for your sustainability plan to include specific sources of income. So how are you paying for things? Where's the grant taking care of things? Where's your local state money taking care of things? And as you project that out, as grant money declines, how are you going to make sure that you can continue to do those things? Now, it's possible that your grant money is paying for professional learning right at the beginning, that after the program is in place, you don't have those large professional development, professional learning costs. So that'd be an example of an early cost that actually diminishes and goes away. So you don't need to find local funds to cover that, because the initial cost, you've built the clock, if you will, starting at the very beginning of the program. And then where the local funds are identified, it's important that the board and the county commissioners affirm that their intentions are to continue to pay for this. Yes, this plan says we're going to use local funds to keep this going after the grant period is over. Yes, the board is aware of this and we support it. Yes, the county commissioners are aware of this and we support it. And then where grant funds are indicated, it's important for your district to identify current or pending funding sources that could be utilized to continue or expand the program. So if there are ongoing costs every year, it costs a certain amount of money to do parts of your program. When the grant funds are finished, how are you going to continue to support those with local funds? So the next item is outcomes and evaluation. So it's important to design a program that's going to do great things for the teachers and the students in your buildings, but it's also important that you have a plan to figure out whether it's on track, whether it's doing what it is that you expect it to do, so that you can make sure that it's of the highest quality that you expect it to be. So as you think about what this is going to look like in your design, Your outcomes and evaluation portion of your application will score well if you articulate your proposed outcomes in really specific terms. So think of it like writing SMART goals. So by a particular time, X% of something will change. This example here is 10% increase in math proficiency, or 2 standard deviation difference in the North Carolina Teacher Working Conditions Survey. These are examples of outcome and evaluation points that were drawn from previous plans, things that they thought they would impact, that they wanted to measure as they considered how they would evaluate the outcomes of their program. It's important to include your current performance metrics of your district and talk about how that's helping you identify the goals that you have in place. So how's the previous performance helping you decide what your goals are and where you're headed? As we look backwards, this is how we decided what we were going to aim for in our program as we move forward. It's important to identify the ways that your district will respond to those outcomes with respect to program implementation. What happens if you get to the end of year 1 and discover things aren't moving in the direction you wanted? Do you have some course correction strategies in place? How are you going to manage that? What happens if you shoot well beyond your targets? What are your thoughts about what you might do in that case? And then finally, it's important to provide specific timelines. Where are you going to collect that outcome data? Are you going to check at various intervals and points? Do you have some midterm milestones that you want to collect data on? Kind of what are your formative and your summative measurements of your progress along the way? And again, thinking about any program adjustments that you might need to make as you move forward. And then finally, the next slide is something I want you to be aware of. So the State Board of Education has identified that they have a priority that they would like for advanced teaching roles to really support diversity and equity in those advanced teaching roles districts. So as a result, the State Board of Education has requested that we make sure that advanced teaching roles programs are well aligned to the priorities of the State Board, as well as the leadership at the Department of Public Instruction. So there are pieces of the rubric. If you were to look at last year's RFP and read the rubric, it's going to have some dimensions added. And those dimensions are, well, excuse me, it's likely to have some dimensions added. This next school board meeting, they will vote on whether they're adding these or not. I want you to be aware of them. So adding equity and diversity dimensions to the rubric. So the specific language and the subsequent rubric additions are going to go to the board at their September meeting. And at their September meeting, they will decide whether they're going to release an equity enhanced rubric or the existing rubric. So it's really important for you to review the RFP once it comes out in September. Look for these equity dimensions to see if they're there. And in the next slide, I'll tell you what you need to be looking for to see if you see it. So here are the anticipated additions to address equity. These are drawn from the conversation at the last state board meeting. So I expect that it is likely that there will be dimensions either added to existing dimensions, or there'll be another dimension added to the rubric, or maybe some combination of those, that asks applicants to describe how their proposals will ensure that all students in the advanced teaching role schools have access to a highly effective teacher. I expect there'll be a dimension that asks the applicants to describe how the advanced teaching roles program will ensure that teachers, especially early career teachers, are better prepared to meet the needs of every student. I expect that the dimension of equity is, will expect the proposals to describe how the program will provide differentiated support to early career teachers and support all teachers of various cultural and social backgrounds. And then finally, that the selection of advanced teachers, how you decide who you're going to choose to serve in these roles, should include objective measures of teacher effectiveness and ensure that all qualified teachers have an equal opportunity for consideration. So I expect it is highly likely that dimensions of equity will be added to the rubric. We won't know until the September meeting where and in what way they're going to be added. So the quickest way for you to see them will be to read the rubric once the RFP is released on September the 15th. So there's a question that says, will the approval of the North Carolina professional level certification and advanced credentials for licensure replace the advanced teacher roles program or remain an addition to the advanced teaching options? I don't know the answer to that. For those of you that may not be aware, there is, based on the Human Capital Roundtable and the Professional Education Preparation and Standards Commission, there is a group of subcommittees working on a licensure proposal that offers many pathways for teachers to enter licensure, and it's a tiered licensure system. And at its highest tier, it speaks to teachers participating in advanced roles in their district that are shaped a lot like the advanced teaching roles that are occurring through this program. What the intersection is of that new licensure process at whatever point it rolls out and advanced teaching roles as our legislators are funding it, they're not known at this time. But the vision of the licensure process is that advanced teaching roles that help kids do well and help other teachers be the best they can possibly be are an opportunity target at the highest level of our licensing systems and processes. It's not a direct answer to your question because I don't really know the answer yet, but your hunch that the two are related is absolutely spot on. And the future will tell us for sure what that looks like as that licensure model moves forward. So so that concludes my quick run. Again, I thought the best strategy was to share with you what is in that highest level, that right-hand column of the rubric. So as you think about how to design your plan and you want it to score well, if you will look at that right-hand column of the rubric, and if you can put your finger on answers to all of those items in that right-hand column, then you know that you've got a program that is a proposal that is aiming for an excellent rating from the readers and the raters. So Leah, is there anything I didn't mention that you had hoped that I would before we open it up to Q&A from our folks that are much better experts than me because they've been doing some of this work in their districts?
Thanks, Robert. I think that was really comprehensive and good to walk through each of those points to make sure that we're elevating the things that everybody needs to think about. Regarding the question about the new licensure sort of reform movement, BSNC is involved in that work as well. And we're really, I think it speaks to the support, the broad support for advanced teaching roles that a statewide effort to think of through licensure is including advanced teaching roles as sort of the highest level of what a teacher sort of could attain and the highest type of role for a teacher while they're still remaining in the classroom. I will just also say that I think, a few years away from really so we have a long way to go for something like that to really get in place. It's a significant change, and the subcommittees at Pepsi level are working on it now. It would have to be approved by the state board, and then it'd have to go to the General Assembly, and we're still quite a ways away from really seeing that into fruition. So at which point it would come to fruition, there'd have to be a conversation about how to marry these two initiatives, because we've got lots of districts already doing advanced teaching roles. And so we'd have to make sure that we're accounting for the districts who are already innovating in this way and already leading the way in these kinds of roles to make sure that that kind of sits well and aligns with the new system. So I don't want to say I don't want anybody to wait for that to happen if you're interested in advanced teaching roles, because it's still a little ways away. And I don't think it would disrupt what you're doing. It would really complement what you're already doing. So I just wanted to say that at the outset. And then I want to just to open it up for questions. And so you're welcome to please chat in your question, or if you're interested in coming off mute to ask your own question, please feel free to do that. Cheryl, Sylvia, and Robert are here. As I mentioned, Cheryl's in Wilson County. They're just finished their planning year and are going into their first year of implementation. Sylvia's in Edgecombe County. They've been doing this for quite some time. And so if you have questions, please just speak up or chat them in, and we'll let them answer and share their expertise.
I have a question.
Great, go ahead.
The individuals that are doing this, and I was wondering, did you implement full district? Did you get a sample size, or are you guys doing a progression?
Leah, if it's okay, I'll jump in on this one, and then maybe Dr. Wilson has something to add. Good morning, everyone. Here in Edgecombe, we had a slow progression. I think that was a question that was raised earlier about changing the implementation. We started planning a year in advance, and we actually implemented district-wide over the period of 4 years. We started with feeder patterns, a feeder pattern on our north side. So those 3 schools went through the design together, implemented the next year, which was followed by, as they were implementing, then we had another feeder pattern who was actually planning. And then when that second wave implemented, then the other third feeder pattern was actually planning. So we've gone through 3 phases of implementation. And so we are at this time implemented district-wide. As of last year, 10 of our 14 schools had actually implemented opportunity culture, and you had advanced teaching roles. 2 of our high schools are not Title I, and our early college had not implemented. And then we're looking at this year actually rolling it into those other 2 high schools using some of our some additional funds from ESSER.
So here, welcome, glad to have you. Here in Wilson County, we decided to go with a volunteer kind of initiative to start with. We wanted to have 14 schools across the district. We did not quite get 14. I think part of that had to do a lot with being in the pandemic. People were a little nervous about making a commitment. But we provided a lot of information sessions ahead of time to provide principals and their leadership teams what to expect about the grant and what their expectations would be. And then they had to work with their school leadership teams to commit and really have a commitment. And at the end of it, we had 8 out of our 14 middle schools and 2 out of our 6 middle schools. So 8 out of 14 elementary schools, I think I should have said, and 2 out of our 6 middle schools. We did not have any high schools who were participating, but we felt like we would start with 10 rather than the 14 of who wanted to participate, again, partly because of the year that we had. And then this year, we're going to work on having 2 different tracks going at the same time, to where the group of the 10 schools will be in their first year of implementation, and then we'll add on some additional schools this coming year.
What were some pros and cons of you guys' implementation rollout? Like, what is one thing you would do different? Not really cons, but what would you do different if you can do it again?
I can't think of anything that we could have done differently. I think, again, because of we were in the middle of the pandemic, maybe that would be what we would do differently. It's not try to start an initiative as the pandemic is rolling on. I do think that was very challenging. It was hard to convince people, but you know, we worked with Public Impact as our team that led us. That was the group that we selected to help lead us. And they helped us stay on track. When we were so involved in, are we going to open, reopen, come back to face and so forth, it was really helpful to have a group who kept us steering that rail and kept us on track. That part was, the support was amazing. I don't think that we would be where we are if we didn't have an outside source helping us keep along where we needed to go.
Like Dr. Wilson, I don't know that we would have rolled it out any differently. I believe that year-long planning process and working with the vendors to help keeping us moving along was very helpful. A challenge we encountered, however, was there was some changeover in leadership. So during that year of planning, by the time we got to implementation, there was new leadership in the school. And so what was helpful with that was actually having a team of people working together. But, you know, in thinking about what we do differently, I'd have to ponder how do we make sure that both members of leadership are part of the planning process so that if there is changeover, there's still a leader in place who was part of that planning process in addition to the other team members.
And I'll just jump in. Cheryl mentioned public impact, and so they have the opportunity culture model, which a lot of the districts in North Carolina are doing, and they provide technical assistance to districts in the entire sort of process of planning and starting your implementation. And so a lot of districts, there are a few districts across North Carolina who have done this on their own, designed their own models locally and implementing. And then a lot of districts are also using organizations that provide technical assistance. So Public Impact does a lot of work across our state, and RTI International is also doing some of this work. So I'm going to ask my colleague Zach to put contact information in for those two organizations. There may be others that you know of that are not on our list, but we wanted to, as part of this process, if you're interested in looking at like what would it look like to get some technical assistance to do this, and that's something that the grant funds could be used for. We'll go ahead and put that information, and you can reach out to those folks. Stephanie Dean from Public Impact, I think she's on the call, as well as Marcia Navarro from RTI International. So these are just two organizations. There may be others, but wanted to make sure that if you are thinking like, I don't know that we can do this on the ground in our district, we're a small district or whatever, we might want some outside assistance. These are two great organizations that can help. So what other questions do folks have?
Hey, I'm wondering if there is, I know that districts have come up with all different models for the advanced teaching roles, like percentage of the day where they're directly instructing students versus maybe coaching teachers, or some of them are teaching students all day, but maybe teach more students than they would have had traditionally. Is there like a menu that exists where someone has kind of collected the different interpretations of what this might look like?
So I think that that's one of the reasons that we felt like we wanted to go with a vendor to help us do some of that research of what are the different models out there. I mean, we've had instructional coaches at the school level. We've had curriculum and instructional coaches at the district level. But one of the differences is that we weren't seeing the impact that it was making on the students. They were in these roles, but we couldn't see the evidence of that impact. And we were really interested in this particular grant and this initiative to work with trying to see what specific impact that they are making. And the scores, the EOG scores, that's one of the criteria that we're using of our students, will funnel into the growth model for them, those who have been chosen. And the people who have participated in the interviews and have been selected are really excited about that. They've all wanted to know, like, what difference am I making? And so that's been very interesting for them.
Like Dr. Wilson and Wilson County, we also use Public Impact to help us with the model and they have definitions of several roles. In Edgecombe, we actually have, 3 levels of multi-classroom leaders is what we call them. And they work with teacher teams. Some of our MCLs are full release, which means their role, although they work with small groups of students, they work directly with the teachers, giving them coaching and feedback. We use the see it, name it, do it model so that they are making progress along the way. We also have our expanded impact teachers, and they actually work with more students than their peers in the same content area or on the same grade level. And then we have a reach associate who is, I don't want to say they're a TA because they do more than a TA, but they also assist so that teachers can work with more students. And so public impact was really instrumental in helping us define those roles and what the responsibilities of each of those roles would be.
And then I think so you're making me think like we need a menu of position types. So thank you for the suggestion. But I think what we've learned is like even in Pitt County where they've designed their own local model, and we have an event, I think hopefully you've seen the invitation in Pitt County coming up next month. And so hopefully you can join us to learn because their model is totally unique to their work. But even in that model, we're seeing sort of the same types of positions kind of like rise to the top. So this like leader who leads a small group of teachers and really is involved in their instruction, is not trying to coach the whole school, but really coaching, 5 or 6 teachers and knows their kids, knows their content, and is really pushing into their classrooms and supporting them. And then this idea that you're getting paid, you're an excellent teacher, you have a proven track record, and you're getting paid more to take on either maybe an extra section or larger classes or things like that. So those are the 2 really, I think, most common types of positions that we're seeing across the districts, although certainly not the only ones that work.
I've got one more question. I think you've mentioned before that the participation in this program comes with flexibility on class size caps, and thinking about like building that sustainable, like structural and financial like infrastructure in the district. What happens after your 3 or 5 years are up? Would you continue to have that flexibility with class sizes if you've built systems that really support that?
Leah, I'll start with that one if you'd like for me to.
Please do.
Okay, so currently the legislation is written in such a way that those districts that are selected to be advanced teaching roles programs can utilize the class size waiver within the schools in which advanced teaching roles programs are occurring. So the example I gave earlier, if you were a large district and you had 100 schools, but only 25 of them had advanced teaching roles programs happening in them, you can only have those class size waivers at those 25 schools because they're directly associated with the program. Also specifically in legislation is that those class size waivers are only good for the 3 years in which you are receiving funds. There is an awareness that that's problematic and it does create challenges. So I do know that there are efforts on the part of several organizations, the legislative liaisons here at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction among them, to encourage our legislators to reconsider that and think about how those class size waivers could be an advantage throughout the 5-year program period. But currently, the answer today is you could only utilize those waivers in the schools in which you have a program taking place, and you can only utilize them for the 3 years in which you are receiving funds to support your program through the grant.
Thanks, Robert. And the House put the flexibility. So our goal of S&C, or our sort of ideal scenario would be that you would get it for the schools, not the district wide, but for the schools that you have advanced teaching roles in for the period of approval. So as long as you're an approved program by the State Board of Education, and there's going to be a reapproval process. So after your 5 years, you have to go back to the state board and show your progress. And Robert will take the charge in figuring out exactly what that looks like. But you'll be reapproved, and you'd have to sort of say like, we're doing well, this is working for our kids. And so you get reapproved, and then you would get an extension. So that's the ideal scenario. The House included that language in their budget, which came out last Thursday. So there's hope on that piece, but that is an important flexibility for districts. Another thing I'll say, and we're getting close to time, is, as districts have ESSER funds that can be utilized for flexible utilized flexibly for innovation. There's a potential sort of that you might have some some federal dollars that you want to leverage for this. And so applying for the RFP, even if you don't get a sizable amount of money, or even if you don't get what you ask for, as Robert said, sometimes districts don't get fully funded, proposals don't get fully funded, you can supplement with your federal money. But if you're approved by the state board, you do get that flexibility for 3 years, which is really important to having that flexibility to kind of make these staffing decisions and innovative models work at the school level. So with that, we're getting close to time. So I wanted to, Cheryl and Sylvia, do you have like 30 seconds of sort of like, what is your best advice to someone who's interested that you just want to share with folks?
The best advice I could give is to make contact with a district that is currently implementing the advanced teaching roles. That has been the very best for us. We have a grant writer on staff, and that was one of the contacts that she made several different places to make sure that the grant that we submitted was holistic and yet tailored to the needs of Wilson County schools.
Thank you, Cheryl. And in addition to partnering with districts who have implemented, also making sure when you implement this to involve those who will implement. I know one of the things we talk about is getting teacher buy-in, and the best way to get teacher buy-in is make them part of the process.
That's right. That's right.
Great. Thank you, ladies, so much. And Robert, thank you so much for presenting. Quick reminder just of your dates. The RFP will come out September 15th. Best NC will send it out, and we'll be tracking the state board about that equity addition that they may make to the rubric. So we will, if that has been added, we'll put a note in that in our email out to let you know that it's been added. Proposals are due October 15th, and then folks will know by the 15th whether or not they've been awarded. I want to also just quickly plug Best NC regularly convenes advanced teaching roles districts and folks who are interested to learn about the different models across the state. And so we are going to Pitt County on September 27th. We'll be in Greenville at their brand new professional development center, which is really beautiful. And it's from 10 to 2, and we'll learn about their R3 model, and their model is sort of homegrown. So they've designed it from the ground up. And so we're going to learn about their work. And so if you're interested in registering for that event, the registration link is in the chat box right now. So you can just click on that and sign up. We'll provide lunch and just be a day of learning for everyone. And we're going to cross our fingers we can still be in person and all that jazz. So I want to thank you all so much for your attention for this last hour. If we will send out follow-up information by email and contact information for the folks who've been on the call presenting. And so we will speak to you then. And thank you so much for your time, and have a great rest of your day.